Um, I guess I'll just start my story around the time of my parents' separation. Um, my parents raised me in church, and we went every Sunday, every Wednesday, but we weren't perfect. And that showed up in my life when I was 8 years old and they separated. And after that, it felt like everything changed in my life drastically. I had a new stepmom within 3 or 4 months after my parents separating, and then not long after that, I had a new stepdad, and so um, it was just a lot of change at one time. I ended up going to a different school. Clearly we were in church, but we ended up going to separate churches. So just separation in my life, and like I said, my parents both raised me in church on each end, so we continued to go to church and stuff like that. So I knew the name of Jesus, and I knew, all the little Bible stories and all those kinds of things. Um, but I don't think I ever really knew what a personal relationship with Jesus looked like. Fast forward just a little bit, my mom got divorced from the first stepdad that I had and remarried to another one, and she was the one I lived with primarily. So that's the household that mainly had the most effect on me. Um, and my stepdad that I had at the time was a pretty influential person in the church. He was a worship leader, and I've always liked to sing like my whole life. I've been a singer since the time I was 2 years old. I was singing, and so I always was singing in church like that. And he liked to play the guitar, and he was a worship leader, so we got along good at the beginning and everything. Um, but nobody's perfect, and he had, some issues of his own that in turn affected me because I would see us one way at church, and then when we would come home, it was like you were walking on eggshells, and nothing was what we portrayed it to be in front of people. And I started dealing with depression and anxiety probably around the time that I was 12 years old, and I was diagnosed, and they put me on medication. And so I just felt all of that start creeping in on me. I felt like I was having to live like a double life, go to church and be one way, and then come home and then go to my room and just be in this pit of depression. And I felt odd. I felt like I was off because it seemed like I was the only one who had a problem with it. It seemed like I was the only one that was having a hard time playing church and then coming home and it not being good there. So a little past that, me and my stepdad ended up getting into a physical altercation where I in turn got hurt. And it was just really bad. And I just expected that when this happened that my mom was going to, be done with him, and that she was going to kick him out and everything was going to be good and my life was going to get better. Well, that's not what happened. She stayed with him, and I kind of had to suppress everything that had happened with him kind of deep down and not talk about it because it was upsetting to people, and I don't think that they really wanted to make a big deal out of everything, but to me it was a really big deal. And my dad at the time was telling me, well, you can pack up your stuff and come live with me anytime you want. So around this time, I started seeing this guy, and he was older than me, and he was, bad boy, and I just wanted an escape from my reality. I mean, I guess it's like the first time I really started trying to escape reality was at this point. Um, so I would, run off with him, sneak out of my house. I was, doing all the bad teenage stuff, and I was getting in trouble for that a lot. But on the other hand, my dad asked me to move in with him, so I packed up all my stuff one day and I moved in with him, and I thought, this is going to be great. And he took me to Walmart like immediately and was like buying me all this stuff and just love bombing me really and made me feel really, really good. And then he also, wasn't as attentive, I guess, as my mom was. So I felt like I could get away with more as far as, texting a guy I wasn't supposed to be texting and going out with friends and lying and doing stuff I wasn't supposed to be doing. Um, and for a while, you know, that was working. Well, then him and my stepmom at the time ended up getting into a really bad place, and then they ended up separating. And so then he kind of went into, a struggle in his life at that time, and really just wasn't attentive to me at all. And anytime I would try to talk to him or, interact with him, he did not want to interact. He's very depressed, I think, because of it. And then I just kind of felt like, well, I don't have a place here either. He said he was going to take care of me. He said he was going to, make everything better. And now I feel like I'm just kind of back in the same position. Whereas, I thought it was fun to be able to kind of do whatever I wanted. But at the same time, I kind of was like, why doesn't he care at all? So I called my grandma, his mom, and I asked her if I could come and live with her. And she just came and got me one day. And I moved in with her and my grandpa. And that was when I was 15. I lived there from the time I was 15 until about 16 and a half, somewhere in there, because I was almost 17 years old. And then once I moved with them, they were tentative to me. They took care of me, made sure I had everything I needed, bought me a car. But they're grandparents, so they were easy to lie to, and I just did whatever I wanted to do anyways. And the guy that I started seeing when I was a little younger, I still was trying to see him, but he didn't want to be like in a real relationship. He just wanted to play around or whatever, play with my emotions. But it kept me focused on something other than my current living situation. Because at the end of the day, when I would go home and I'd be living at my grandparents', I would think, why is it that my parents both, they have jobs, they're not on drugs, they're not, having some kind of awful thing happening to where I shouldn't be able to live with them, but I'm not, I'm living with my grandparents, and I don't understand why it has to be this way. I don't talk to my mom really at this point, just because of what happened with my stepdad. And then with my dad, he didn't really come around a whole lot to see me. And I just felt like that I was kind of abandoned in a way. Even though I was the one to, leave, I felt like I had to because of the circumstances. And it wasn't like they were chasing me down either, saying, no, stay. So I just kind of felt really abandoned. So I just took my focus off of that and just started doing everything that like my friends were doing, like the partying and the drinking and, trying a little bit of weed and chasing boys, whatever. So focused on all of that. Well, then it really just took me over and became my entire life. This guy did. At the end of the day, it became everything to me. And I ended up, moving in with him right before I graduated high school. I'd already basically moved in with him. And he was a lot more into the like addiction than I was. At this point I was not like addicted to anything. But he was. He's an alcoholic. And he had been drinking since he was like 12 years old. And by the time that we got like serious, like started really dating, he was like a full-blown straight up alcoholic. Bad. And so right from the start of us seriously dating and me like really living with him and stuff, it was already bad. It was already a disaster. He would get so drunk that, he'd pee in my car and I'd have to get him out and drag him inside, and then he would just cuss me out and be terrible to me. And then in turn, I would be terrible back to him, and it was just toxic. And then things ended up getting physical. And it drove me literally insane because I thought that I loved him so much that nothing that he could do would make me leave him. In my mind, I thought, I'm never going to leave him because there's nothing that's so bad that he could do that I wouldn't love him. And I'm just going to stay. I'm going to be here with him because that's what I want somebody to do for me, is to love me past everything and just be there for me. So I stayed for a really, really long time, and my mental health went completely down. I ended up having no friends. I didn't have anyone to turn to or talk to. Um, I put church and God kind of in the past. Not that I didn't believe in God, but I felt angry, really, because of what had happened with my stepdad. You know, we went to church and we played church, and everything was nice and great at church, and then come home and it was kind of not. And so I kind of resented God for that. And so I put that in my past and decided that that wasn't what was going to help me. So I turned to drugs. Um, I didn't really like alcohol too much at the time, just because he was an alcoholic and I didn't want to encourage that. So I started smoking weed to calm me down, to keep me just kind of in a state of I don't care what he's doing. Um, when he would get real riled up, I would just be high, so wouldn't really care. If when we did fight, I'd just go get high and then be okay. And I think that was the first time I really started feeling like I needed something to cope with life, you know. Um, well, then that wasn't enough anymore for me. I got introduced to Xanax later on down the road. I tried it, and I remember when I tried it, I thought, okay, when's this going to work? And then I woke up the next morning and my face was in my food. Like I was eating and then I fell asleep in my food. And I, for some reason, just thought, well, that's a great escape. Like I can just take that and then be just out of it, and I don't have to feel anything. So I just smoked weed and was doing Xanax. Well, then around that time, I became friends with this girl. And I mean, we weren't like in a relationship or anything, but she became like my person that was my person away from him. And then I finally kind of started to see, I don't need him. I don't need to be with him. I don't need him. And she was, encouraging me like, you can leave him, and I'll be here and we're going to go and do this together. And, but she was a partier too on drugs. And that's what we did together. That's what we bonded over. So whenever I left him, I finally ended up leaving him and moving out of his house. We kind of were off and on for a little while. But I ended up leaving him and going on with her. And this is where my drug scene like really went out of control, because after I left him, I really felt like, okay, I'm just going to party it up and this is what's going to make me feel better. And for a while, it did. It was really fun. I'm not going to lie. I had a lot of good times, but then it turned into, dependency, like waking up and literally being like irritated because I didn't have anything or I didn't have something. Um, it was just weed and pills. And then of course I'd socially drink. I would go and I would drink at parties and things like that. But then one day my friend kind of separated herself from me. And for a little while we weren't like talking and I didn't understand like what was going on. Well, then she told me that, or actually no, a friend told me that she had started dabbling in meth. And for some reason, I wasn't like, mad at her for doing the meth. I was mad at her that she didn't want to do it with me and wanted to hang out with other people and not do it with me. So I went to her and I was like, if you're doing meth, I want to do it. Like, that's so crazy. But I was basically like, we're going to do this. We're going to do it together. So we did. We did meth, and I tried meth for the first time. And after I tried meth for the first time, that was, I can't compare it to anything else. It was the best feeling I'd ever felt in my life. I felt like it did not matter what I did. Nothing I did had consequences. I was on top of the world. It was great for like 2 days. And then after I started coming down off of it, I started like hallucinating, started feeling like paranoid, like people were looking at me. I got really super depressed because they call meth dope because it's dopamine. It gives you a dopamine rush way, 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 way up. And then when you come down, you just go right, like way low. So that's what happened. I went way low and I just thought, man, I've really messed up. I should not have done this. And I went home to my mom and I told her what I did. And after I came down, she told me that I had to get some help or I couldn't live with her. And I ended up moving out of her house because I didn't want to go back to another rehab. Right before this happened, I forgot to mention that I had started going to an inpatient or outpatient rehab. So I'd only just go to the place every day, and I wouldn't actually like have to stay there. I just go to these classes or whatever. And because my life had already started to spiral before the meth, it was already starting to get out of hand. And then I left the program and I went and did meth, and then I went home and was, messed up. And so my mom was like, "You're gonna have to go get some like real help. Like you're gonna have to go somewhere if you want to stay here. You can't stay here with me." And so I called one of my other friends who lived in Little Rock, and she said, "Oh, well, I'll come and get you. You just need to get away from there anyway, and you can just come and live with me." Well, I went and lived with her, and I told myself I was going to stay away from the meth, and I did stay away from the meth for a while, but I would come home every weekend and hang out with people, friends from down here, and I got a hold of Adderall, morphine, more Xanax, still was smoking weed, so it wasn't like I was doing any better. I was just trading one thing for another. And then I accidentally fed her baby alcohol. I remember I came home from a wild weekend and I went into the kitchen to get her daughter some juice. And in a cranberry juice bottle was some alcohol, but I didn't know it was alcohol. It said cranberry on the bottle. And I poured it into her sippy cup and I gave it to her. And after she was done, her mom smelled it and she was like, "That was liquor." And I just knew at that point, I can't be here anymore because I'm going to screw this kid up. And I'm not ready to fix myself, So I need to get away from the baby because I'm just going to end up ruining her life and scarring her. So I ended up calling my mom and telling her I was ready to go and get some help. Well, really, I just was at a point where I didn't have anywhere else to go. And in the midst of all this, I had jobs, I had a vehicle, 2 different vehicles. One of the vehicles I wrecked when I was on meth and Xanax at the same time. I wrecked it in a ditch at 3 a.m. I had different jobs and I would just quit them. I remember one job I called in and made up some stupid excuse, but really I was just so messed up from the night before that I didn't want to go to work. So little by little, I just ended up losing everything. And at this point, I had nowhere, and I did not want to continue to mess up that little baby's life. So I called my mom and told her I was ready to get help. And so she came and got me. And I ended up going to my first actual rehab in Texas. And it was not a faith-based because I refused to go to a faith-based. I didn't want to hear it. Not that I didn't believe in God. God was my higher power because you have to have a higher power when you go. God was my higher power, but I just didn't want to do anything the way that my family wanted me to do it. And at this point, my mom had separated from the stepdad that I had issues with. But it was long, long after me and him had issues or whatnot. So I still really held some resentment against my mom and had issues. We had really bad issues in our relationship, but she really had turned a leaf and she was trying to help me. And I, not literally, but I spit in her face and just told her, you don't understand what I'm going through. You did this to me. All the addict things that people say, like everyone else did this to me, but I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to heal myself or whatever. And also in this time period, I got into, horoscopes and witchcraft, and I was mixing that with God and kind of just connecting everything and totally demonic stuff. But that was another attachment that got onto me and took me into a dark hole. But I ended up going to that first rehab in Texas, and then as soon as I was on my way back home, I had already made up in my mind, as soon as I got back, I was going to go get the first thing I could get my hands on, whatever it was, like alcohol, pills, whatever I could get my hands on. So I came back and I started partying again, lying to my mom because she was letting me live with her. I think I got another job at that time. And this was around the time that I reconnected with my husband, now husband. But we had went to church together when we were younger. And then when we got a little older, we went on our own separate ways. And then I went to a Christmas program at the church. I don't remember why I was home or what was going on, but I went to the Christmas program at the church and he was there. And he looked totally different than he did whenever I had known him when we were younger. And I asked my mom, I was like, is that Tyler Young? And she said, yeah, he's been struggling like you are. And you should message him and tell him you're praying for him. And at that time, I totally was not praying for anybody. And I just thought, he looks like he might be some fun. So I messaged him. And I think like right at this point, for me, is where that scripture comes in. What the enemy meant for evil, the Lord's going to turn it around for good. You planned evil against me, but God had a plan. Right then, I think God saw that. And he was like, okay, I'm going to work with this. And there was no way of anybody knowing that at the time. But now that I look back at the span of things, that had to have been the moment. He's like, okay, we're going to work with that. And so I ended up texting back and forth with him for a little while, but we never like met up in person or anything. But he'd always be like, hey girl, come hang out with me or whatever. And I always kind of blew it off because, I had everything I was needing down here. Drugs, party, whatever. Well, then around probably June or July of 2022, maybe 2021, around there, I ended up quitting my job one day because I was just irritated. And all I could think about, honestly, ever since I had tried meth was meth. And I tried to do all the other stuff. And yeah, that was great, whatever. But all I could think about was dope. That's all I really wanted. Everything else just ticked me off. I even was on coke for a little while, and it just made me mad. I tried to, do the whole rave scene and go to these like rave parties and stuff like that, and do the coke, and I just was not doing it for me. And all I could think about was meth. Well, I knew he was on it, and so I was like trying to hang out or whatever. And so I ended up having somebody take me down there to where he's from, which is a couple towns over. And at this time, I still have literally nothing. I don't have a car. I have a job, but I have to be taken back and forth by my grandma to and from my job. I still didn't really have anything except, the money that was on my card. And so I had somebody take me down there. I had a bag packed for like a couple of days, and I was totally wigged out. We, did dope, and then I was totally wigged out. I was like, I can't stay here. I got to go home. I can't be doing this. So I went home and I went to rehab again. This time I went to rehab in Colorado because my mom told me the same thing. You're not going to stay here if you're on drugs. So you're going to have to go somewhere. It wasn't even really that I wanted to go to rehab. I just didn't want to not have a place to live. So I was like, okay, Colorado sounds nice. Let's go there. So my dad bought me a plane ticket. I went to Colorado and I was there for 2 months. And then I got kicked out of that program because I tried to fight somebody there. I was really aggressive. Then I left there, and on the way home, once again, I'm like, I'm just ready to go get messed up. I can't stand this being sober. I tried this. It's not working. So I get back and immediately, of course, go right back to the same thing. And, I kind of play the I'm better thing with my mom. And then, behind her back, I'm really just doing everything I was doing before. Sneaking in liquor in bottles, Mountain Dew bottles and stuff, so she wouldn't know I was drinking. Having people take me to a dealer's house so I could get Adderall. Just everything was the same. And then once again, I was like, this ain't cutting it. I'm ready to just give it up and just be a dope head. I'm tired of trying to have a place to live with running water and all that. I'm just going to go and do what I need to do. So I left out of nowhere, once again, didn't tell anybody where I was going. Had a guy down from where my husband was from come and get me. He's like a 60-year-old man, and he came and got me and brought me to Tyler. And then after that, I did not leave. Like, I stayed there in a trap house. There was literally holes in the floor. There was no running water, no food half the time. And, for people first on dope, like me, I wasn't like super, super addicted. I was still pretty new, pretty fresh in it. And so whenever I would do dope, I would not be able to sleep. I would not be able to eat anyway. So that stuff really didn't matter to me at the beginning. But then after a while of being there and being on it, and my body kind of regulating out on it, started getting hungry. I started coming down and hallucinating and having issues. And me and my husband, well, we weren't married at the time, my boyfriend, we fought like crazy. We could never, keep each other from fighting. And it always just went south every single time. We had to beg people to let us come and take a shower, or I'd have girls steal in my clothes. I wouldn't have anything to my name. And there'd be times I'd call my mom like, come get me. I'm ready to be I'm ready to be different. I'm ready to change. Whatever, she'd ignore me. Because at this point I was a liar. I would say I was ready to be done, and I clearly was not ready to be done. And all I cared about was dope and Tyler. That's about it. And really, I didn't even care about him the way that I thought I did, because nobody that's on drugs like that can care about somebody else. It was just a warm body to not be alone in it, I guess. And fast forward a little bit, I end up going off the rails really, really bad, just mentally, because meth, messes with your head really, really bad. We were running the streets, like we slept on couches. We didn't like have a home. We didn't have a shower. We didn't have food. We literally walked the streets to get dope every single day. I was withering away. I was like 113 pounds. That's the lowest I've ever been in my whole life. And I was getting sickly, really, really sickly. And it just at that point I was just ready just to give up. And I ended up leaving and going back to another rehab, which was Saving Grace in Texas. I went there. I finally gave it up, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to a faith-based rehab. Maybe this, will help me. And really the only thought I had behind it truly in that time was maybe if I can actually get better this time, that me and him could have a chance. Because, somewhere in my heart, I really do and did love him. And I wanted us to be able to be together. And I thought in my head, the only way that's going to happen is if I actually try to go and get sober. So I tried, and that didn't work because I got into it with somebody there, ended up getting kicked out of that program. And then as soon as I got back, my mom told me, you're not talking to Tyler. And I didn't have a phone or anything at this point. You're not talking to Tyler. You're not getting on the internet to talk to Tyler. You're not getting anywhere near Tyler. You're not going anywhere. You're not doing anything. You're on lockdown. Like, you're going nowhere. So I raided her house when she wasn't there. I found an old iPad, got a hold of him somehow on there, and left and went back to him. And then once again, it was the same story. So bad. Got really, really bad. Except this time, I had gotten so high that I picked at myself, like in a high trance, and there were sores all over my body, and they got infected, and it was really nasty. And I, didn't have access to a shower, didn't have access to medicine, stuff like that. So most of the time it was really, really gross. And so I actually started getting sick. And I also ended up having to go into the hospital at one point because I had sepsis in my kidneys. I don't know exactly, I guess from dehydration, just not being properly clean. I got the sepsis in my kidneys, and then I had to go to the hospital. I literally couldn't walk. I called my dad, and thank God he came and believed me, because if he wouldn't have, I would have died. And I got there to the hospital, and they told me, if you didn't come today, you would have died. So that happened. And then saying all this, it didn't stop me. It literally didn't stop me. I would still leave, and I would still go back, and I would still go back to being homeless. I'd still go back to having nothing, all my stuff stolen from me, people turning on you. You can never trust anybody. no food, no money, no nothing. And it just, nothing was enough to stop me until I thought that um, these men that I was around, these older men down there, were going to take advantage of the fact that I wasn't from there and I didn't have family there. And, if they wanted to do something to me, they could have done anything. And one of these older men told me one time that he believed that he was a prophet sent by God to guide girls through the dope game. That's what he told me. And then that's when I knew that was wrong. I was like, that's totally not it. But he truly believed that. He truly believed it. And we got pulled over one time in Morrilton, and I had a pipe on me with drugs in it. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to go to prison and this is going to be over. And they get us out of the vehicle and they're searching his truck. And while they're searching it, I throw it behind me, throw the pot behind me. And I'm like, they didn't see it. Well, then they start reading out all this stuff that he's done, all the records that he has, all the stuff. And I mean, it was so long. And I'm thinking, this dude really is bad. I thought, I knew he went to prison and stuff, but I didn't think I don't know why I wasn't realizing the reality of it, that he was really as bad as everyone was saying. And then I found out that he had molested a girl at 15 years old and told her, I guess, that she was his wife, and just super, super twisted stuff, and clearly something that he had grasped a hold of while he was high. And so I remembered whenever he decided to tell me this, I remembered all that. And I'm like, I'm kind of getting scared that he might try to do that to me, try to take me off somewhere and take me and hurt me. And nobody's going to be able to save me. I mean, me and my boyfriend, we fight all the time. There's plenty of time for me to be separated, and I'm scared, something really bad's going to happen to me. So I ended up deciding I didn't want to be involved in that anymore. I was like, I do not want to die like this. That's what really scared me to the point of, okay, I'm done. I need to leave. I need to get out of here. So I called the police because I called my mom, and my mom would not believe me. She was like, you're just saying this stuff again or whatever. There was a tornado in Little Rock, and that's where my dad lives. And so he couldn't get to me, literally couldn't get to me. He was crying and he was scared for me, but he could not get to me. And so I ended up having to call the police because she said, if you're that scared, call the police. So I did. And they ended up talking to me and telling me that, because I thought maybe I'm just high and I'm just thinking all these things and I'm just paranoid. But really, they started telling me all these things that basically verified what I was feeling and all the things I was thinking. That he very well could do something like that to me, and that they know him. He's had this type of record before. And there was also an open investigation going on with another woman that had been assaulted by several of these men in the area that I was staying in. So, I mean, it could have very well happened to me. So I left, and I ended up going back at one point to Tyler, but he was not in the same spot as we were the last time. He was with different people. And I thought, I can't be without him. I need him. So I went back to him, and then once again, it was just still the same bad ordeal no matter who we were around. And my dad told me I had one more opportunity to get straight. This was it. This was the last time that they were coming to get me, the last time they were going to let me cry wolf. You got one more opportunity. I'm going to get you into a homeless shelter here in Little Rock, help you get into there. And then they're going to help you get a job. And then I'll help you get a car once you have a job. But I need you to, this is your last chance. And I didn't like the idea of it at first because he said homeless shelter. And to me, I wasn't homeless, but really I was homeless. Didn't have anything. And so once I accepted that, I left and I went to a homeless shelter in Little Rock. And I was there for a little while. And I got a job, and then he got me a car, and I was doing good. But I was still hopeful that Tyler could come and be with me, that we could be together, and that we could do this sober thing together. Because I had done it. I was doing it. So I had a job, and I had a car. And I was living, a good, better life. And I just had hope that, he and I could make things work. And around this time, I started getting into my Bible. And the homeless shelter. It was the only thing I had that was mine, because everything else that I had was stolen from me. I, didn't have anything that was mine anymore. And that was the only thing I had from my past before the drugs that was mine. And I remember crying out to God, I want to hear you. I want to know what it sounds like to hear your voice, because I don't know what that sounds like. And my grandma gave me a book. It was called Whisper, How to Hear the Voice of God. And I read it, and while I was reading it, the Lord gave me a prophetic song, and I started writing it out, and it just started coming to me. It just started coming to me. And I really had felt the Lord for the first time, I think, ever in my entire life. I felt it right then. And it comforted me. And I prayed that, me and Tyler would be able to work it out, because even after all this, I still loved him. And anyways, I ended up continuing to contact him even though I wasn't supposed to. And things were getting kind of tough at the homeless shelter. I was starting to get into it with people. And then I left there, and I just started driving. I just turned my location off so my dad couldn't see where I was going, and I just started driving. And I was like, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to give Tyler the option to leave with me. If he doesn't want to, that's fine. I'm going to go back, but I'm going to just give him the option. And I felt like I should just turn around. I shouldn't do it, but then I just kept going. And I pulled up, and he was there where I went to go get him, and I asked him if he would leave with me, and he did. And so we left, and we ended up living in hotel rooms in Little Rock. But we got sober. He got a job, and his mom gave him a car so that he could get around. I had a job and a car. It was really rough living in hotel rooms, but you have to start somewhere when you don't have anywhere to go. And we did it. I mean, we were offered dope several times while we were living in those hotels, and we told them no. And it was the craziest thing, because when we were out on the street and having to walk miles and miles for it every single day just to hit somebody's pipe, like not even to get anything, it was so hard. Nobody was just giving us anything, for free. And then we had people just showing it to us. And I was like, I see you, devil. Like, that's totally Satan trying to tempt me, because never would this have happened before now until we're actually trying to get better. Well, then we ended up starting to go back to church where my trauma really happened, like where my mom went. But that's where we met. So, and his family went there too. So we started going to church there together, and things started to really turn around for us. But I still was afraid that we would not be able to maintain the hotels. And then we did end up moving in with a lady that he knew. And still, that we had a little room to ourselves. It was not ours. And I just thought, this isn't going to last. This is never going to work. And I prayed to God, like, Lord, if this is your will, open the door for us to be able to get our own place, to have something that's ours. And probably not even like a week or two after that, my pastor at the church that we were going to and that we attend now, he said, if y'all want to move back here, I can put down the deposit for y'all to move into a camper. And we took it. And then I knew that was from God, because I just prayed that, and then that door opened. And so we were able to get different jobs down here in Russellville, and moved down here into a camper. And so we just went from being completely at war with ourselves and at war with each other and on drugs and just really, really bad. And once we got away from the place and away from the people and away from the drugs and put our mind on a goal and got in it with God and got right with God, he blessed us. And I was able to go home finally. And I felt like I'd done all this running for so long, just from everything. I didn't even know why I was running anymore. And I remember just going to church and just literally just falling on the floor at the altar and just welching out like, God, please forgive me. And I just remember telling my mom, I'm so sorry that I treated you the way that I did, because I really stepped all over her and treated her so badly and talked to her so badly. And she really was trying to help me. And I just remember surrendering it all to God. And after all of that, things got so much better. And everything else that has happened since then has just been God. And I couldn't be more thankful that I'm in the place that I'm in, because I never thought that I was going to be able to come out of addiction. I thought that I was going to die like that. And I was okay with it. I used to tell myself that if I died out there, that at least I was dying doing something that I loved. But really, I was just miserable, and I didn't know how to fix myself. But I didn't realize that it's not me that is going to be able to fix myself. Me and my flesh, I'm nothing. Me without God is nobody. But me with God, I can do anything that He calls me to do. And we ended up getting married, not only because, we didn't want to live in sin anymore. That was part of it. But the fact that we didn't want to live in sin anymore, because we had a relationship with God now, and we wanted to do it right by Him. And we truly loved each other and wanted to do right by each other. And so we did that. We got married at our church, just us and a couple of people. It wasn't a big thing or whatever. And a couple of months later, we moved out of the camper and in with my mom so that we could try and save some money to get an actual place instead of living in a camper. And I remember still thinking then, getting worried, like, God, where I can't see your hand in this. I don't see where you're going to come through. And then a house came open for us. And 2 days later, after we got in the house, I tested positive for pregnancy. So I just see like God had it lined out to where He was going to have, our daughter taken care of, and He was taking care of us because we've been obedient. We've done everything that He's asked us to do. And I don't know, everything since then has just kind of fallen into place. And my mental health has been completely restored. I have bad days still, but it's nothing like it was before. He came into my heart, and then He covered my mind, and I could actually sleep at night without nightmares. And I don't ever think about going back to the way that I was living. And He's not only changed my life, but He's changed my husband's life 100%. I mean, we are nowhere near the same